here to talk about what it is that's going to take place if these tariffs are deemed illegal. And I think that's actually a more likely scenario than not. And although that a lot of people seem to think that it's going to cause this devastating moment for the economy, what it'll actually do is create a windfall for the corporations. And now, something that I found very interesting when I started to do the research on these tariffs and how the transactions work by the importer paying these transactions, it actually takes close to a year before it's liquidated. And now this is interesting to think about, because if these transactions takes about a year before it is liquidated, there is a time in which that there is a protest in which that can take place by the importer to say, hey, I want my money back. Now they can ask for that refund, this, essentially a filing of the protest. They can do this within 180 days of the liquidation. So now this is very complicated when you try to wrap your head around it. But ultimately, if you can imagine that all the tariffs that are being paid have a year before they are actually liquidated, and then within that year of any time, there can be a filing of the protest, including 180 days after the liquidation. So we think about what it is that's happening right now within the credible threat of tariffs and the tariff implementations and all the money that is being paid. There is a lot of news and a lot of expectations and a lot of belief that this money has now been collected and will be held on to, like it won't be relinquished. But yet there is this legal aspect to it that if the Supreme Court finds that these tariffs were deemed illegal, and it's very much a possibility that that could happen, all these companies could be filing for that protest within the 180 days and get that refund back. Now, they will get the refund because there is already a legitimate process in which that this would be taking place. Like the laws are already written. I left links down in the description to all the, all this information. Now, if you think about it, it's already a method of operation in order for this to take place. Like they don't have to invent it, right? The tools are already there. And the idea that it could take a whole year, right, before the liquidation takes place. So here we have like Donald Trump and the tariffs and everything that's happened since he has taken office. It hasn't been a year since that's happened. If it goes for an entire year, then you could have a possibility that all the tariffs could have a protest filing and be refunded back to those corporations. Think about the stimulus to the corporations, like the bailing out of the corporations during this time. Like they've already charged for the increase. Like the impact of the tariffs is now being pushed down to the consumer. The consumer essentially pays it. And then the corporations file for a protest to these tariffs if they're found illegal and then get the money again. It's like double dipping into this tariff. It's like a total bonus for the corporations. Something that I also think is important to take into consideration is the retaliatory effects of these tariffs. Like other nations putting tariffs on our stuff, which won't be necessarily alleviated by the Supreme Court. Right? So this is one that's going to stick in there. When you consider what it is that the Federal Reserve was looking for and what it is that is needed for monetary policy as far as a global experience, being the custodian of the world reserve currency, all this stuff really starts to make sense and start to line up. I mean, here it is, the Federal Reserve wants to have an elevated inflation scenario. Many people don't realize that, but we have proven it many times on this channel through their own words and speeches that having a monetary policy with inflation expectation that is persistently too high is definitely part of their goals. Now, they have that. They have this inflation expectation that is too high. Now, if you were to alleviate the pressure of tariffs, it would bring this inflationary expectation back down. However, if you have broken the supply chain because of the implementation of these tariffs, then think about, let me turn off the Wi-Fi. Is the sound coming in, guys? Yeah. All right. Just want to make sure. Because if you think about it, if you have implemented these tariffs and then you break the supply chain of it, you break the partnerships, that is very hard to reestablish. It's not like you can just go and say, all right, well, now that the tariffs are alleviated because the Supreme Court says that they're illegal, we'll just go back to doing business the way it was. You can't. Business doesn't go back to the way it was. It remains back in the idea of what it had happened during the tariffs, meaning that those partnerships stay broken. Like the new establishment of shipping chains stay connected. They don't just like, oh, hey, man, they're back to doing business the way the old way. We're going to go back and do business with them again. Now, once you have severed that, it's broken and now it doesn't come back. This is a way that they can keep the supply chain broken. And I know that seems very odd for a lot of people, but when you consider what it was that the Federal Reserve was looking for monetary policy, keeping the supply chain broken, or at least the idea or the expectations of a broken supply chain, will keep them in a position in which that they can continue to conduct their monetary policy. And again, that might be backwards for a lot of people to internalize, but we have proven it again here on this channel many times through their speeches that having an elevated inflation and inflation expectation is most definitely part of their plan. It raises the neutral interest rate, it gets it ever closer to the Fed funds rate, and it makes the economy far less restricted. All this is working very much in line with a lot of the communications of their strategy that they had delivered from 10, 15 years ago or better. And now here it is coming into fruition. Many people look at it and say, hey man, the Federal Reserve is acting with snap judgments and acting like, they're trying to, I don't know, either benefit or hurt the administration or something of this nature, but that's not the case. They have very much talked about the scenario that we now face today, which is one of elevated inflation expectations, one of them that pulls the neutral interest rate up off the zero area or the low neutral interest rate environment. All these things are now occurring. And so if I think about it, when it comes to the tariffs and what it is that the Supreme Court is most likely going to decide on these things, that as the people believe it's going to hurt the country, hurt the economy, hurt the government, hurt all this other stuff, it's going to be a beautiful windfall for the corporations out there. I have very little doubt in my mind that'll happen. All right? I mean, I don't know how many other people can internalize this information in this way, but this is something I was very suspicious of before Donald Trump even took office. And now that I am finding that the legalities of it are very much lining up to serve the purpose of being able to bail out the corporations by literally just saying, oh man, they're illegal, and already have the tools and mechanisms in order to refund that. I mean, look at this links down I leave down in the description, right? You have I mean, it's hard to describe it without the notes like right in front of me. But essentially you got the Customs, Border and, Patrol or Protection. Those guys have a system in which that the new products that were coming into the United States and the tariffs that were being implemented on those had a mechanism for which it would essentially put that money into limbo, right? Until it was liquidated, until that transaction was met to completion. And it's not meaning that once the stuff had gotten in, it was like once it was found that this was a legitimate transaction, then it is liquidated. However, if there is a filing process that is already existing that they can take advantage of, all these corporations could be filing protest, right? Do these protest filings on these tariffs. And if the Supreme Court founds them to be illegal, it very well could be that they need to be refunded. Yes, it could. I mean, I guess I should look at it in two ways, because the Supreme Court, I guess, could retroactively do it, saying like, well, from this point on, all of them are illegal and all the money that you have already collected you get to keep. But I could only imagine that that would just send some really, like, I don't know, maybe they could get away with that. I would just imagine that that would probably very much upset a lot of, the people out there and how it is that they would be conducting their business going into the future, thinking about what it is that would actually happen with these implementation of tariffs that were illegal, but yet were found to be okay because they don't want to disrupt the market. Like, it's basically, yeah, he broke the law, but we're just going to let him keep the money after robbing the bank, right? Because we don't want to disrupt anything else out there. Like, I can't imagine that being what the Supreme Court does, but I guess it could be very much a likely scenario that it could happen. I think, honestly, it's going to be very much like what it is that I have been sharing here today on this video, in that they will find them illegal, and that the process for refunds has already been established through this protest filing process, in which that these corporations could already be set up to get a windfall of refund, which is going to be essentially a bonus to these corporations since they have already charged the consumer for the tariffs. You see how this is going to, like, I mean, it's essentially a way of bailing out the corporations in almost like a shadow way. Like, it's just like, hey, we don't have any other choice. They're illegal. We have to give them the money back. But they already got the money. They already got the money because they charged the consumer. Right? I know it's so backwards from the way that a lot of people look at this stuff. But I mean, honestly, look at the links down in the description. That's what's telling you. I'm just trying to share what it is that I have found, what I have been suspicious of, and what I believe is actually taking place within this whole idea of tariffs. I mean, I've said it from day one. What tariffs? What tariffs are we talking about? The ones that are being worked around, the ones that are being exempted, the ones that are being reduced, what tariffs? And then here at the very end of the day, we could very well find that the Supreme Court finds them illegal, and that will actually be a windfall for the corporations who have paid tariffs this entire time, who can have filed those, protests. Pretty interesting, right? Okay, new and creative ways to pick our pockets are being invented every day. Yeah, I kind of agree with that one. All right. When tariffs come off market, boom. Yeah, and see, that would also do another thing. It would actually relinquish a lot of the pent up money and ideas of investment into corporations, or these corporations investing into their own business. Like, I was reading reports of how the Federal Reserve has been getting reports from these corporations that they are holding back on hiring, even though they would like to do it, because they are worried about the implementations of these tariffs and what they could actually do. So they're like, essentially just like in a wait and see pattern. Well, if you remove the tariffs, boom, there goes the wait and see pattern. And then you got a lot of, free flowing economics that are now happening that are not pent up from the idea of tariffs. At a B2B commercial level, we have been fed marketing about tariffs increasing prices, paid the price in anticipation, doubled orders to make early. If it is canceled, sellers lose buyers' trust. Yeah. A big shakeup. Yeah, I think already it's kind of been a big shakeup anyway. And so to shake it up even more wouldn't be a surprise to me. And how is it that you're able to basically get a bonus or a stimulus package to the corporations without pissing the people off is very difficult. Like, COVID was pretty easy, right? They actually were able to stimulate the corporations with funding by the market perception of the Federal Reserve buying corporate debt. Now, what happened was the Federal Reserve set up, with the conjunction of the Treasury, with help of the Treasury. I mean, this was part of it, using unusual and exigent circumstances to establish a special purpose vehicle to buy corporate debt. Now, this special purpose vehicle to buy corporate debt was funded with hundreds of billions of dollars, and the mainstream media attention to it was absolutely exploding. Everybody said that the Federal Reserve was going to be picking the winners and losers, and I was one of those people, right? I was screaming it myself. What actually happened was that information got out there to the people, and these corporations were largely able to fund themselves before that special purpose vehicle was even established. right? And I mean, this is not me making this stuff up. This is coming from the Federal Reserve itself. They were like, man, just the idea of this special purpose vehicle buying corporate debt has got the market trying to front run the Federal Reserve, and they funded all these corporations by buying corporate debt, believing that the special purpose vehicle was going to be just buying up all mass hundreds of billions of dollars worth of this stuff, and that the price of it would absolutely explode and the yields fell. That all took place before the Federal Reserve even set the thing up. All right. So this is how the Fed operates. This is how the government operates right now in trying to stimulate these corporations. Think about it. They didn't have to do anything at all. They didn't have to do anything at all to get the corporations all the funding they needed during COVID, except put out the credible threat that they were going to be buying corporate debt with that special purpose vehicle. Think about it right now. Here they are setting up a scenario in which that the people have paid the tariffs, which are sitting essentially in limbo, waiting for the Supreme Court to deem them either legal or illegal. If they are illegal, then the protest filing can take place and all that money gets refunded to the corporations. So again, the people themselves will stimulate or essentially bring the stimulus package to the corporations without the government actually having to do it. See, they said they were going to do it during the COVID, right? By buying up the special, or with the special purpose vehicle, buying up the corporate debt. But just the idea of it got the corporations all the funding they needed. Well, here it is. The market has already put the money into escrow, essentially, just waiting for the moment to be delivered to the corporations. Just think of this happens. I know this is a hypothetical what-if scenario, but I believe that this is the more likely case. In fact, I would put this up into the 90 percentile of the most likely outcome. That all these tariffs that everybody is talking about will be deemed illegal. And it'll have, and because like I said, they already got the mechanisms to do it. They don't have to invent the idea of how they refund these tariffs. They already have the mechanisms. And that's what's important to understand. That's why I'm sharing these links down in the description for you guys, is to know that they don't have to invent an idea on how to make this work. They already have it in play. Alrighty, guys, I got to go back to work. It's been awesome hanging out with you. What do we got here? 143 people watching with 36 thumbs up. Please go hit that thumbs up button. By hitting that thumbs up button, you're going to get more people to see this video, to recognize what it is that could possibly come from this. Nobody is sharing information like this. There might be a few. The links are down in the description. There's a couple of people who will bring it up. Wall Street has already developed a tool for corporations to get their refund money in advance before the refund even takes place. So there is a real possibility of this happening, but yet very, very few people actually internalize this information or the concepts behind it. So, all right. Not going to replace revenue. All right. Once deemed illegal, where are they going to replace that revenue? They're not. They don't. That's the thing. They don't even have it now. See, that's what's really like crazy about it, is that the transactions have to be liquidated. So the money, although may be there in number, right? But the reality is that they don't have their hands on it yet. That actually has to come into fruition with the liquidation of those transactions. And if it usually takes, and from what I'm gathering, it takes about a year for that to happen. So some may happen earlier than that, I don't know, but it takes about a year for these transactions to become liquidated. And if that is to take place at the time of the Supreme Court deeming them illegal, then that filing protest can take place, and all that money that is sitting there waiting to be liquidated essentially goes back to the corporations through their protest filings, right? So I'm assuming that to be the case, because this is all hypothetical, but that's what I've gathered from the readings that I've shared with you down in the description. I've always been suspicious of this. I have been suspicious of this being since day one, that something like this would be the case. You know? All right. Preach, Simon. Well, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. I hope this is helpful. I mean, to be honest with you guys, I know a lot of you can do the research better than I can. That's why I share the links down in the description. So maybe you could come up with something that I didn't hear. I'm really just kind of highlighting the key points that I have found. Really, it could be much deeper than this. And I also have to think about what we should expect from the retaliatory tariffs that are on top of this. And all of it, in my mind, is all about dealing with the fact that we are trying to be a custodian of the world reserve currency, while at the same time dealing with massive inequality that is going to be taking place here in the United States. How it is that they can continue to operate going down this road is, I mean, it's going to be anybody's guess, but I know it's going to take some sneaky behavior, some shadow government action. I don't know how to put it, but to think that, man, the process is already there to do this refund, that tells me, man, there's a very real possibility of this. Okay, I got to go. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know. Go hit the like button, share it with everybody you know. Oops.